Okay, imagine you're a detective trying to solve a cold case. But not just any cold case, a 2,000-year-old cold case. How in the world can historians possibly figure out if a text from that long ago is actually a reliable record? It's a seriously fascinating question, right? I mean, we don't have video footage, we don't have photographs, so historians literally have to sift through layers of dirt and ancient parchment to piece together the truth. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to put on our detective hats and look strictly at the raw, historical, and archaeological data surrounding one of the most heavily debated texts in human history, the New Testament.
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to evaluate the source material by walking through 5 very specific pillars of historical methodology. We've got the manuscript evidence base, key archaeological discoveries, non-Christian historical accounts, the scholarly criteria of authenticity, and finally, this absolutely wild phenomenon called undesigned textual coincidences. Let's get right into it.
All right, starting at the macro level, Exhibit A, the manuscript evidence base. Because, before historians can even ask if an ancient text is true, they have to ask, wait, do we even have what was originally written down? To really wrap our heads around the scale of the New Testament's evidence, we kind of have to anchor it against some classical works we all accept as history. Take Homer's Iliad, right? A total cornerstone of Western Civ. We have about 643 ancient copies of it, with a 500-year gap between the original writing and our earliest copy. Or take the Roman historian Tacitus. We've got just 20 copies of his work, and there's a massive 1,000-year gap. But then, you look at the New Testament. We have over 24,000 supporting manuscript copies across different languages. And the gap between the original writing and our earliest surviving fragments? Less than 100 years. I mean, historically speaking, that is just an absolutely staggering difference in volume and early dating. Now, because we have this unprecedented mountain of overlapping manuscripts, textual critics can actually cross-check the documents to see how accurately they were copied over the centuries. And the result of all that checking? Scholars estimate a 99.5% textual purity across these thousands of documents. That indicates incredibly reliable transmission. So what's the takeaway here? It means we can pretty much completely rule out the whole telephone game theory. We know with extraordinary certainty what the original authors actually wrote down.
Okay, so we know the text is pure, but does it actually anchor to the real world? Let's move to Exhibit B, key archaeological discoveries.
For the longest time, critics argued that certain figures and locations in the New Testament were just, myths, made up, no physical backing. But the dirt actually tells a very different story. Take 1961. Excavators in Caesarea Maritima dug up the Pilate stone, which has the exact name and title of Pontius Pilate carved right into it. Then in 1990, construction workers stumbled upon this highly ornate bone box, an ossuary, belonging to Caiaphas, the high priest. And in 2004, the actual Pool of Siloam, the exact spot of a specific miracle narrative, was definitively uncovered in Jerusalem. So, the physical earth itself is repeatedly validating the precise names, titles, and locations we read about in the text. And honestly, this physical evidence does something else that is absolutely crucial. It locks the events into a definitive timeline. A great example is the Gallio inscription found in Delphi, Greece. This is a Roman stone mentioning a proconsul named Gallio. Well, from official Roman records, we know Gallio's term was around AD 51 or 52. Because of that one rock, historians can confidently date the Apostle Paul's presence in Corinth and his early writings to that exact historical window. We're talking just 2 decades after the reported events.
So the documents and the dirt align? What about external corroboration? Let's open Exhibit C, non-Christian historical accounts. When evaluating history, having a hostile or neutral outside witness is huge.
Let's go back to Cornelius Tacitus for a second. He's one of Rome's greatest historians, writing around AD 64 about Emperor Nero blaming Christians for burning Rome. Now, Tacitus had literally zero motive to make this up. In fact, he completely despised Christians. But as a hostile witness, he inadvertently corroborates the core facts for us. He confirms a man named Christus was executed by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius.
And we get another totally independent layer of confirmation from Flavius Josephus, a first-century Jewish historian. He also writes that Jesus was known as a wise man and was condemned to the cross by Pilate. So when historians take these neutral or openly hostile Roman and Jewish accounts and layer them together, they find this striking independent verification of the New Testament's core historical outline.
All right, let's zoom in from the external evidence right down to the microtextual level. Exhibit D, Scholarly Criteria of Authenticity. How do modern critical historians read these specific ancient texts to filter out myth from actual on-the-ground reporting? They actually use 8 distinct criteria of authenticity. Let's highlight a couple of the major ones.
The first major test is the rule of immediacy. Basically, historians love early evidence. Scholar Dr. Gary Habermas has pointed out that embedded right into the text of the New Testament, like in Paul's letters, are these brief, tight creedal statements that scholars can trace all the way back to the AD 30s. That is within just years or maybe even months of the events happening. It perfectly satisfies the rule of immediacy, capturing living eyewitness memory way before any kind of legend could realistically take over.
Then, to filter the actual quotes and events, scholars apply something called the criterion of dissimilarity. It's pretty straightforward. If a recorded event or saying is super awkward, embarrassing, or doesn't neatly serve the later agendas of the early church, it is highly likely to be genuine fact. I mean, think about it. Why on earth would you make up something that makes you look bad or completely confused? This is an incredibly powerful scholarly filter used to isolate pure historical reporting from later invention.
Okay, which brings me to my absolute favorite part of this whole investigation. Exhibit E, Undesigned Textual Coincidences.
An undesigned coincidence is essentially an insignificant, super obscure detail in one narrative that perfectly yet completely unintentionally matches up with an independent detail in another account. These subtle little interlocks are a massive green light for genuine eyewitness testimony, mostly because they'd be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for a forger to seamlessly invent across multiple documents.
Let me show you exactly how this works. It's like a 2,000-year-old puzzle. In Matthew's account, the guards are hitting Jesus and they mockingly demand, "Prophesy, who struck you?" Now, if you only read that account, you're kind of scratching your head. Like, why is it a test of prophecy to know who hit you? Can he just look at them? But over in Luke's entirely separate account, he casually mentions a tiny, passing detail. The guards had blindfolded him. Boom. One gospel leaves a weird gap, and an entirely separate gospel effortlessly provides the missing puzzle piece, the blindfold.
Check out this other one. In John's account of feeding the 5,000, Jesus specifically singles out Philip and asks him, "Hey, where can we buy bread?" Why Philip? John doesn't tell us, but if we flip over to Luke's account of the same event, we learn the miracle took place near a town called Bethsaida. Okay, keep that in mind. Now look way back at an unrelated early chapter in John where he casually mentions that Philip was originally from Bethsaida. Jesus asked Philip because Philip was the local guy. It's brilliant. These insignificant details harmonize completely unintentionally. There are absolutely no signs of artificial coordination here. And the crazy thing, this isn't just a fluke occurrence. Researchers have meticulously cataloged over 50 of these subtle, undesigned coincidences in the gospel records alone. It's this massive, complex web of unintentional harmony that points so strongly to the factual accuracy of the independent eyewitnesses.
So when we take all this data together, it literally holds up in court. Under the modern federal rules of evidence, ancient documents over 20 years old, found in expected locations, with no suspicion of alteration, are formally deemed authenticated. In fact, Simon Greenleaf, a legendary Harvard law professor, famously applied his rigorous legal cross-examination standards to the New Testament. His conclusion? The evidentiary weight of these texts would easily satisfy a court of law.
So let's wrap this all up. What have we actually uncovered in this explainer? We've got an unprecedented volume of 24,000 accurately transmitted manuscripts. We've got the physical dirt and archaeology corroborating highly specific people and places. We have hostile, secular, outside witnesses verifying the core historical events. We've got texts successfully passing 8 critical scholarly criteria for authenticity. And to top it off, this vast puzzle-like network of undesigned textual coincidences proving independent eyewitness memory. These 5 distinct lines of evidence converge to form a historical tapestry that is uniquely robust.
And that brings us to a final question for you. The whole purpose of this explainer was just to lay out the structured data that historians actually use to evaluate this ancient text. But as we know, facts require interpretation. Given this exhaustive convergence of textual, physical, and historical data we just walked through, how will you weigh the evidence of antiquity? It's a pretty massive question, and one that absolutely warrants your own further exploration. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and always keep following the evidence wherever it leads.